Hello and welcome to Mr. Mar's 3-Minute History, quick summaries about a range of different history topics. Today we're going back to the time of the Atlantic slave trade, and we're looking at the actual regular experiences of the people who were slaves. For centuries, around 13 million people were kidnapped from Africa and taken to the Americas, where they were forced to work in a variety of different jobs, and in a variety of different situations. The largest number of people who were taken became field workers. This was because they were expected to grow a variety of products such as sugar, cotton, coffee and tobacco that would then be taken back to Europe and sold. Field work could be extremely difficult. Field slaves were expected to work for long hours in extremely hot conditions. The jobs that they were doing were incredibly physically demanding, and they were not necessarily given the required food or water. As a result of all this, there was often a very high death rate. In some parts of the British Caribbean, around half of slaves would die within the first 2 years of arrival. This was one of the reasons that so many slaves were needed, because so many would ultimately die. Field work was the most common, but a number of slaves also did housework as well. This would be in the homes of the people that owned them. The jobs they were expected to do were the same types of jobs nowadays that we would think of people being paid to do. This was, for example, people being butlers, people being nannies for the owner's children, people being cooks, people being cleaners, and carrying out other jobs like these. Sometimes house slaves were treated a little bit better than field slaves. They sometimes had better living conditions and clothes, although it's also worth noting that they were perhaps more prone to be sexually assaulted by owners. In terms of overall slave living conditions, they were generally very poor. Most slaves were expected to live in very often overcrowded wooden shacks. They may have basic furniture in them, it very much depended on the particular owner, but at other times they might not. In terms of food, again the conditions varied depending on the owner. Some slaves were given a weekly allocation of food and expected to make it last. Other slaves were given food at set amount of times by the owner. Some owners did also allow their slaves to grow their own vegetables in their own time, but not every slave was given this opportunity. One of the most difficult aspects of a slave life was the punishments. Owners ultimately could punish slaves for whatever they wanted. This might be for things such as refusing to follow instructions or not having believed to have worked hard enough. The punishment varied. The most common was whipping, often done in front of other slaves as a warning. Other punishments included slaves being given extra work to do, or not being given enough food. They were also sometimes expected to wear chains and collars, which made life very difficult for them. In extreme cases, if the slave's action was deemed serious enough, a slave could even be killed, although this was obviously very rare because owners did not want to have to pay to replace their slaves.